since I had the day off, I wanted to catch up on a few videos. But this is a video of Lex Friedman sitting down with John Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer is the author of the Israel Lobby. It is a book that was written in 2007, kind of detailing how um, APEC and other lobbying groups that support Israel and Israelis have literally bought and paid for almost every politician on both parties. We may do a small video on the Tucker Carlson interview with Thomas Massey, and he literally says that he's pretty much the only one that isn't bought and paid for. But so this is what kind of like led up in part in the more recent decades to the conflict that's kind of going on over there. Obviously, we can go back to the Nakba. We can even go back to the Ottoman Empire before it was even called Palestine or Israel. So this is definitely some great knowledge, especially people on the right. I really feel that a lot of um, Zionist Christians, you should really understand this. The reason why is because you're ultimately being pimped out. Um, the Israel lobby has literally um, supported and paid a lot of the professors and given endowments to a lot of these theological colleges and universities. So what you're being kind of taught definitely goes against scripture. Um, but we're not going to really dive into that. But so if any Christians who support Israel, American Christians that do that, or anybody on the right that is just adamant, I mean, you should really be informed. So we're gonna go through this interview.
Controversial book on the topic.
Not probably. Clearly the most controversial book I ever wrote.
So you've criticized the Israel lobby in the United States for influencing U.S. policy in the Middle East. Can you explain what the Israel lobby is, their influence, and your criticism over the past, let's say, a couple decades?
Well, the argument that Steve Walt and I made, actually, we wrote an article first, and which appeared in the London Review of Books, and then we wrote the book itself. Uh, our argument is that the lobby is a loose coalition of individuals and organizations uh, that push American policy in a pro Israel direction. And basically, the lobby is interested in getting getting the United States, and here we're talking mainly about the American government, to support Israel no matter what Israel does. And our argument is that if you look at the relationship between the United States and Israel, it's unprecedented in modern history. This is the closest relationship that you can find between any two countries in recorded history. It's truly amazing the extent to which Israel and the United States are joined at the hip. And we support Israel no matter what, almost all the time. Uh, and our argument is that that is largely due to the influence of the lobby. The lobby is an extremely powerful interest group. Now, it's very important to understand that the American political system is set up in ways that allow interest groups of all sorts to wield great influence. So in the United States, you have an interest group or a lobby like the National Rifle Association that makes it well nigh impossible to get gun control,
Yep.
right? Uh, and so with the Israel lobby, you have this group of individuals and organizations that wield enormous influence on U.S. policy toward the Middle East. And this is not surprising given the nature of the American political system. So our argument is that the lobby is not doing anything that's illegal or illicit or immoral or unethical. It's just a good old fashioned American interest group. And it just happens to be extremely powerful. And our argument is that this is not good for the United States because no two countries have the same interests all the time. And when our interests conflict with Israel's interests, we should be able to do what we think is in our national interest, in America's national interest. But the lobby tends to conflate America's national interests with Israel's national interests and wants the United States to support Israel no matter what. We also argue, and I cannot emphasize this enough given what's going on in the world today, that the lobby's effects, the lobby has not been pushing policies that are in Israel's interest. So our argument is that the lobby, right, the lobby pushes policies that are not in America's interest or not in Israel's interest. Now you're saying to yourself, what exactly does he mean by that? What every president since Jimmy Carter has tried to do, as I said before, is to foster a two-state solution, to push Israel, which is the dominant player in greater Israel, push Israel to accept the two-state solution. And we have run into huge resistance from the lobby whenever we tried to, let's be blunt about it, coerce Israel, right? In a perfect world where there was no lobby and an American president was free to put pressure on Israel, to coerce Israel, I believe we would have gone a long way towards getting two-state solution. And I believe this would have been in Israel's interest. But we couldn't get a two-state solution because it was almost impossible to put meaningful pressure on Israel because of the lobby. So this was not in Israel's interest, and it was not in America's interest. And that was the argument that we made. And we, of course, got huge pushback for making that argument.
What's the underlying motivation of the lobby? Is it religious in nature? Is it similar to the way war hawks are sort of militaristic in nature? Is it nationalistic in nature? What's if you were to describe this loose coalition of people, what would you say is their motivation?
Well, first of all, I think you have to distinguish between Jews and Christians. You want to remember that there are a huge number of Christian Zionists who are deeply committed to Israel no matter what, right? And then there are a large number of Jews. The Jews are obviously the most important of those two groups in the Israel lobby. But, one of the arguments that we made in the book is that you should not call it the Jewish lobby because it's not populated just by Jews, and Christian Zionists are an important part of that lobby. But
So you look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden is obviously a Catholic, and over the decades, he has definitely made it very clear that he's a Zionist. He was raised to be a Zionist. He said it. He said it over the decades. So obviously, you can still be a Christian, and of course, we can have the whole debate between Catholicism and Protestant. But you can even look at somebody like Mike Huckabee, who is let me double check his position. I don't want to steer y'all wrong, but he's currently the governor of Arkansas, but he just got nominated to yeah, to serve as the U.S. ambassador to Israel. So you're talking about, a Christian Zionist, um, literally in a very, I mean, of course, domestically, ambassador isn't a very powerful position. But when you're talking about, the most powerful lobby in America with our most dominant ally, and this and Mike Huckabee being the ambassador, um, we do have a problem. Um, it's not good for our national security interest. We have literally spent um, roughly, probably more now since when the study came out, but we spent $24 trillion just in Afghanistan and Iraq alone. That was at the that was done because of the pressure from Bibi Netanyahu. He was wanting to invade 7 countries after September 2001, and so he kind of, got his way. And of course, we'll look at one of the Jeffrey Sachs interviews with Tucker where he kind of details that. But you know, um, yeah.
Furthermore, there are a good number of Jews who are opposed to the lobby and the policies that the lobby purveys. And there are a number of Jews who are prominent anti Zionists, right? So, and they're obviously not in the lobby. Or if you take a group like Jewish Voice for Peace, right? Jewish Voice for Peace is not in the lobby. So it's wrong to call it a Jewish lobby. But with regard to the American Jews who are in that lobby, I think that really this is all about nationalism. It's not so much religion. Many of those Jews who are influential in the lobby are not religious in any meaningful sense of that term, but they self identify as Jewish in the sense that they feel they're part of a Jewish nation and that in addition to being an American, right, they are part of this tribe, this nation called Jews, and that they have a responsibility um, to push the United States in ways that support uh, the Jewish state. So I think that's what drives most, if not almost all, the Jews. This is not to say there's not a religious dimension for some of them, but I think that the main connection is much more tribal in nature.
So I had a conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said fundamentally, if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. So the Zionist project is tied at the hip to the Jewish project. What do you have to say to that?
Look, you can define anti Semitism any way you want, right? And you can define anti Semitism to incorporate anti Zionism. Uh, and I think we have reached the point where anti Semitism is identified today, not just with anti Zionism, but with criticism of Israel. If you criticize Israel, some people will say, you're an anti Semite. And if that's your definition of anti Semitism, it's taken an important term and stretched it to the point where it's meaningless, right? So when Steve and I
And to kind of give a little bit more context, anybody that was part of the Ottoman Empire, which is now, we know as modern day Palestine, they're Semitic. Egyptians are Semitic. Uh, Syrians are Semitic. A lot of people from that part of the Middle East are Semitic. So when you use the word anti-Semitic, you call somebody anti-Semitic, it's an injustice because you're literally picking one Semitic group over another Semitic group. And of course, we can go in a little bit more detail about lineage and the more recent DNA tests that have been done by the universities out of Israel. But I'm not going to get too deep into that right now. Um, I don't want to like stray away from the point, but you know, the Ashkenazi Jews are really just Eastern European Jews, um, and they're of the Jewish faith. But to not really go too deep into that, I mean, we can't just say that if you criticize the state of Israel and then you're being called anti-Semitic, but at the same time, there's also other Semitic groups there.
I wrote the book, wrote the article, and then wrote the book, all sorts of people said that we were anti Semites. This is a ludicrous charge, but what they meant was you're criticizing the lobby, you're criticizing Israel, and therefore you're an anti Semite. Okay, if that's what an anti Semite is, somebody who criticizes Israel, probably half the Jewish community, if not more, in the United States is anti Semitic. And of course, you get into all these crazy games where people are calling Jews self hating Jews and anti Semites because they're critical of Israel. But even people who are anti Zionist, I don't think they're anti Semitic at all. You can argue they're misguided, that's fine. But many of these people are Jewish and proud of the fact that they're Jewish. They just don't believe that nationalism and Jewish nationalism is a force that should be applauded. And you want to understand that in the American context, there is a rich tradition of anti Zionism, right? And these were not people who were anti Semites, if you go back to the 30s, 40s, 50s. And the same thing was even true in Europe. There were all sorts of European Jews who were opposed to Zionism. Were they anti Semites? I don't think so. But we've gotten to the point now where people are so interested in stopping any criticism of Israel that they wield this weapon of uh, calling people anti-Semites so loosely that the term has kind of lost meaning. So I think Netanyahu is wrong-headed to equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism.
Alan Dershowitz was one of the people that called you specifically anti-Semitic. Uh, so just looking at the space of discourse, how do you? Where's the slither of hope for healthy discourse about U.S. relationships with Israel uh, between you and Alan Dershowitz and others like him?
Well, I think until there is a settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's no hope of putting an end to this nonsense, right?
So these are just uses of terms to kind of cheat your way through the discourse,
It's
shortcut.
no, it's the silence people. Right. It's very, very important to understand that one of the lobby's principal goals is to make sure we don't have an open discourse, a freewheeling discourse about Israel, because they understand, people in the lobby understand that if you have an open discourse, Israel will end up looking very bad. Right. You don't want to talk about the occupation. You don't want to talk about how Israel was created. Right. All these subjects are ones that will cause problems for Israel. See, just to go to the present crisis, okay, when you have a disaster, and what happened on October 7th is a disaster, one of the first things that happens is that people begin to ask the question, how did this happen? Right? What's the root cause of this problem? This is a disaster. We have to understand what caused it so that we can work to make sure it doesn't happen again. So we can work to shut it down and then make sure it doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start talking about the root causes, right, you end up talking about how Israel was created, right? And that means telling a story that is not pretty about how the Zionists conquered Palestine. And number two, it means talking about the occupation, right? It's not like Hamas attacked on October 7th because there were just a bunch of anti Semites who hated Jews and wanted to kill Jews. This is not, Nazi Germany, right? This is directly related to the occupation and to what was going on inside of Gaza. And it's not in Israel's interest or the lobby's interest to have an open discourse about what the Israelis have been doing to the Palestinians since, I would say, roughly 1903, when the second Aliyah came to Israel or came to what was then Palestine, right? We want to talk about that. And we don't want to talk about, from the lobby's point of view, the influence that the lobby has, right? It's better from the lobby's point of view if most Americans think that American support of Israel is just done for all the right moral and strategic reasons, not because of the lobby. And when John Mearsheimer and Steve Walt come along and say, you have to understand that this special relationship is due in large part to the lobby's influence, that is not an argument that people in the lobby want to hear. So the point is, you have to go to great lengths for all these reasons. You have to go to great lengths to silence people like me and Steve Walt. And one of the ways to do that is to call us anti Semites. I think the chapter or the section of the book where we talk about this charge of anti Semitism is called The Great Silencer. That's what we call the charge of anti Semitism, the Great Silencer. Who wants to be called an anti Semite, especially in the wake of the Holocaust? Do I want to be called an anti Semite? Oh my God, no. Uh, and so it's very effective. But, you know, it is important to talk about these issues, in my humble opinion. And I think if we had talked about these issues way back when, it would have gone a long way towards, uh, you know, maybe getting a two-state solution, which I think was the best alternative here.
It's complicated, and I wonder if you can comment on the complexity of this, because criticizing Israel and criticizing the lobby can, for a lot of people, be a dog whistle for sort of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. That this idea that Jews run everything, run the world, or this kind of cabal, and it's also very true that people who are legitimately anti-Semitic are also critics of Israel in the same kind of way. And so it's such a complicated landscape in which to have discussions, because even people like David Duke, who are racist, don't sound racist on the surface. Well, I haven't listened to him enough, but like there's dog whistles. It's a complicated space in which to have discussions, because I wonder if you can sort of speak to that, because there's this silencing effect of calling everybody anti-Semitic, but it's also true that there is anti-Semitism in the world. Like, there is a sizable population of people that hate Jews. There's probably a sizable population of people who hate Muslims too. But
a lot of hate out there.
A lot of hate out there. But the hatred of Jews has like a long history, and so you have Rolling Stones have a set of great hits, and there's just a set of great hits of the ways conspiracy theories that you can make up about the Jews that are used as part of the hatred. So there's like nice templates for that, and I just wonder if you can comment on operating as a historian, as an analyst, as a strategic thinker in this kind of space.
Yeah, we obviously, when we wrote the article, which we did before the book, gave this subject a great deal of thought. I mean, what you say just now is music to our ears. I'm talking for me and about me and Steve. I mean, I think that your point about dog whistles is correct. Look, we went to great lengths to make it clear that this is not a cabal. It's not a conspiracy. And in fact, in a very important way, the lobby operates out in the open, right? Uh, they brag about their power, right? And this was true before we wrote the article, right? And we said in the article and the book, and you heard me say it here. First of all, it's not a Jewish lobby, right? Um, Secondly, it's not a cabal, right? It's an American interest group. And
the American system is designed such that interest groups are perfectly legal, and some of them are super effective.
exactly, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly right. And, and there was nothing that we said that was anti Semitic by any reasonable definition of that term. And, huge numbers of Jews have known me and Steve over the years, and nobody ever said that we were anti Semitic before March 2006 when the article appeared, because we're not anti Semitic. But look, you've got this interest group, right, that has a significant influence on American policy and on Israeli policy. And you want to talk about it. It's just important to talk about it. It's important for Jews, right, in the United States, for Jews in Israel to talk about this. The idea that you want to silence critics is not a smart way to go about doing business, in my opinion. If we were wrong, if Steve and I were so wrong and our arguments were so foul, they could have easily exposed those arguments. They could have gone uh, into combat with us in terms of the marketplace of ideas and easily knocked us down. The problem was that our arguments were quite powerful. And instead of engaging us and defeating our arguments, they wanted to silence us. And this is not good, right? It's not good for Israel. It's not good for the United States. And I would argue in the end, if anything, it's going to foster anti Semitism. I think you don't want to run around telling people that they can't talk about Israel without being called an anti Semite. It's not healthy in terms of the issue that you're raising, right? But I still agree with you that it is a tricky issue. I don't want to make light of that. I know that there's this piece of literature out there called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And I fully understand that if you're not careful, you can come close to writing volume 2 of the protocol. But I don't believe that we wrote anything that was even close to that. And again, I think that a healthy debate on the issues that we were raising would have been not only in America's interest, but it would have been in Israel's interest.
So I'm definitely going to go through a couple more related videos and topics. I think that, you know, in order for us to be America first, we have to not only just protect our American Jews from from real anti-Semitism, but we can no longer just excuse,
Can
um,
you explain your
you
view?
know, we can no longer just excuse um, spending trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars for another country. I mean, if the French wanted to go and start war for 100 years with Spain, you know, us as Americans, we would be up in arms. We would eventually just start to reject it, especially if we were sending trillions of dollars. And then, you're seeing horrifying videos of, Spaniards, innocent women and children dying, getting blown up. So, it'll be the same thing if, Great Britain was, going after, uh, the Norwegians or something. So, we really have to be very, very careful. And so, in order to stay America first, um, we really have to watch how we spend our money, what we're spending it on, making sure that we're taking care of our own before we try to help other countries, especially wealthy countries. I'm sure Israel has taken an economic hit, but they were like the seventh wealthiest nation in all of Asia. So it's not like they can't, if they were to choose to do this, which I still wouldn't agree with because it's still um, war is war. Unjustified war is no good for no one. Um, but they could be able to finance their own, but they're not. So we definitely need to be talking about this. We definitely need to be waking up American Zionist Christians. Yeah. So, but y'all be good. Y'all be safe. Peace.